Hi, I'm Hailey. A few days ago, my father called me a parasite at dinner, just for standing up for myself. 2 days later, his platinum card got declined. You can imagine the shock. But what hurts more isn't the insult. It's what's been happening in the shadows for years. My own family manipulated me, used me, drained me. And now, I'm finally done. But here's the question. Can I ever escape them, or will they drag me back into their web? Hook 2. You think calling your own daughter a parasite is bad? Try this. My father's betrayal went way beyond words. He cut me off emotionally, financially, and then, 2 days later, his credit card was rejected. But here's the twist. It's not just about a credit card or a single insult. This has been building for years. My inheritance, my house, everything has been a lie. Can I really break free? Or is it already too late? I had always been the invisible one, the one who did the work, the one who kept the wheels turning while everyone else got the praise. But this time, I couldn't ignore it any longer. The insult, the betrayal, the endless years of being the afterthought in my own family, it all came crashing down at the dinner table. Dinner was supposed to be an occasion for celebration, a rare moment when the family gathered together. My father, seated at the head of the table, beamed proudly beside his new wife, and my siblings, as always, were the shining stars in his eyes. I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on me. They didn't even have to speak for me to know where I stood. In their eyes, I was just the fixer, the one who picked up the pieces when their lives fell apart. But tonight, things were different. Tonight, I was done. Done with being ignored. Done with being belittled. It was as if a switch had been flipped, a spark ignited by a single comment. As the conversation flowed, my father casually tossed out the words that would change everything. "Hailey," he said, with that familiar edge of mockery in his voice, "you're nothing but a parasite. Always there, always needing something from us." A chill ran through me. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I just smiled. The smile I had perfected over the years, the one that hid the hurt, the anger, the disgust. It wasn't the first time my father had said something like this. But tonight, it was the last straw. The room went quiet for a moment. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the sting of humiliation, the weight of all the years I had spent bending over backwards for them, for nothing. Not even a thank you. Not even an acknowledgement of the sacrifices I made, the time I gave up, the years of being nothing but the family's emotional punching bag. But then, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done being invisible. I was done accepting this treatment. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I excused myself from the table, my hands shaking as I grabbed my coat and walked out of the restaurant. I needed to get away, to think. I couldn't breathe in there anymore. The weight of the years, the weight of my father's words, was suffocating. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, sharp and refreshing. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence of the world around me seep in. The city lights flickered in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness inside me. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep lying to myself, telling myself that maybe one day my father would see me for who I really was. I had spent my whole life trying to earn his approval, bending myself into a shape that wasn't mine, all in the hope that one day he would notice me, but it was never enough. It would never be enough. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. It wasn't me who needed to change. It wasn't me who needed to try harder. It was them. It was my family. They had made me feel small, insignificant, like I was nothing more than a tool they could use when it suited them. But I wasn't going to let them do it anymore. I stood there for a while, my breath coming in shallow bursts as I processed everything. And then I made a decision. Enough. Enough of this. Enough of being the family's emotional crutch. This was the last time. As I walked back to my car, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would be filled with conflict, with resistance. But for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Power. Control. a quiet strength that came from knowing I was finally taking control of my own life. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. From this moment on, I was going to fight for myself. And as I drove away, leaving the restaurant and my family behind, I vowed to myself that this would be the beginning of something new, something better. I walked away from the dinner, feeling a weight heavier than any I'd ever carried before. My father's words still echoed in my head. Parasite. How had I gotten here? How had I allowed myself to become the family's emotional punching bag for so long? The anger surged within me, mixing with a deep, guttural frustration. I had been trapped in this cycle for years, always playing the role of the quiet fixer, the one who put everyone else's needs first. But not anymore. Tonight, something inside me had snapped. As I walked through the parking lot, I could feel the cold night air biting into my skin. But it didn't matter. The chill was nothing compared to the fire burning inside me. This wasn't just about my father's words, it was everything. All those years of silently watching my siblings thrive while I silently suffered in the shadows. All the times I'd done everything for my family, only to be treated like I didn't matter. I was done. The humiliation I'd felt at that table didn't just come from his words. It came from the realization that this was it. There was no saving me in their eyes. I had spent so long trying to prove myself to them, trying to win their love, but it was never enough. And as much as I hated it, I finally had to admit that the only person I could rely on was myself. It was hard to admit, but I had been complicit. I had let them walk all over me, let them treat me like an afterthought. The guilt sat like a heavy stone in my chest. Why had I stayed silent all this time? Why hadn't I stood up for myself sooner? I couldn't keep going like this. The years of neglect, the endless emotional exploitation, it was time to face the truth. I needed to stop hiding behind my family's expectations and start living for me. But confronting my father, that was another matter entirely. For years, I'd kept my head down, tried to please them, always hoping for a sliver of acknowledgement, a moment of approval. I had been terrified of confronting him, of being shut down, of being rejected even more. It seemed easier to just let things slide. But now, as the anger simmered inside me, I knew that wasn't an option anymore. The next morning, I woke up determined. I could feel the power of my decision as soon as my feet hit the floor. Today, I would face him. I wouldn't back down this time. I called him. The phone rang once, then twice before he picked up. His voice was warm, but it didn't comfort me anymore. "What's up, Hailey?" I felt my heart race, but I steadied myself. This was it. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "About last night." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him sigh like he already knew where this was going. "Hailey, don't make a big deal out of this," he replied, his tone dismissive. "It's just a joke." "No, Dad," I said, my voice stronger now. "It's not just a joke. I've been treated like this for years, and I'm done. I'm done being your emotional punching bag." There was silence. I could feel him getting defensive, the same way he always did when I called him out. "Hailey, don't overreact. You're being overly dramatic." I couldn't believe it. All these years, I had quietly taken everything, and now, when I finally spoke up, he dismissed me as dramatic. It was the same old story. "No, I'm not," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I'm telling you how I feel, and I'm not going to keep pretending like it's okay. Your words hurt me, and I'm not going to let you treat me this way anymore." He scoffed, clearly irritated now. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill. You're my daughter. You're fine." "I'm not fine, Dad," I said, almost pleading. "I'm not fine." The conversation ended abruptly. I didn't hear an apology. I didn't hear any acknowledgement of my pain. I was just left with the feeling that nothing had changed. In fact, it felt worse. I had faced my fears, spoken my truth, and it had led to nothing. Later that day, I spoke with my mother. I had hoped for some support, a sign that maybe she would understand. But instead, I was met with silence. She didn't say a word. It hit me then. My father wouldn't change, and neither would she. They were all complicit. I had always hoped that one day they would see me for who I was, but now I understood. I wasn't going to get that. Not from them. Not ever. I had spent my entire life looking for their approval. And for what? To be dismissed? To be belittled? It was time to stop seeking validation from people who would never see me for who I truly was. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of the day sinking in. I felt a mix of bitterness and relief. The confrontation hadn't gone the way I'd hoped, but I felt something change inside me. For the first time, I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't going to let them control me. I wasn't going to let their rejection define me. I needed to focus on myself, to build a future without their constant judgment. So I started making plans. I began looking into the courses I had always wanted to take, the ones I had put off for years because of family obligations. I wasn't going to be their fixer anymore. I was going to fix myself. But just when I thought I was starting to get control of things, my sister called. "Hailey, I need you," she said, her voice panicked. "There's an emergency. I don't know who else to turn to." It was just like old times. She was always the golden child, always getting what she wanted, always turning to me when things went wrong. I felt a pang of guilt as I listened to her. But then I remembered everything I had just told myself. I had to set boundaries. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. "I can't help you this time," I said, my voice steady. "I'm sorry, but I need to focus on myself." There was silence on the other end. I could feel her shock, her confusion, but I didn't back down. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. I had done it. I had finally set a boundary. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my family would never let me go so easily. The days following the dinner felt strange. A heavy silence hung between me and my family, one that had never been there before. My decision to finally stand up for myself, the decision to stop letting them walk all over me, had set something in motion. And now I could feel the shift. They didn't like it. It started with little things. My father's coldness. A comment here, a silent look there. He refused to acknowledge my boundaries, as if he didn't even see them. The passive-aggressive behavior was palpable, his attempts to manipulate me back into his control, more subtle now, but no less powerful. It was like he was trying to erase me from the equation, trying to remind me that I was nothing without him. At first, I felt a sense of empowerment. I had made my decision. I had drawn the line in the sand, and no one could cross it anymore. But as the days went on, I started feeling something else, something sharp and cold, creeping into my chest. Loneliness. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was distancing myself from everything I'd known. The family I had once relied on, the family that had always been my support, was now slowly becoming the enemy. And no matter how strong I felt in my resolve, there was no escaping the isolation that came with it. The first real challenge came when I got a call from my father. His voice was colder than ever, laced with the unmistakable edge of disappointment. "Hailey, we need to talk," he said. "I've been thinking about everything, and I don't appreciate the way you've been handling things." His tone, that usual air of authority, made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. This was it, the confrontation I'd been avoiding. "I'm not going to apologize," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not going to keep taking your shit. I'm setting boundaries, and you're just going to have to accept it." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a frustrated sigh. "You've always been so dramatic, Hailey. You're just going to throw away everything I've done for you. You think you can make it on your own?" His words stung, but they didn't hit as hard as they used to. "I'm not asking for anything," I replied. "I just want respect." He scoffed. "Respect? You'll never get it if you keep acting like this." I didn't know what I had expected from him. Maybe I hoped he'd see things my way, but I should have known better. He wasn't going to change. None of them were. Then came the real blow. "I'm cutting you off," he said, the words hitting me like a punch to the stomach. "No more financial support. You want to be independent? You figure it out on your own. You'll see how long that lasts." The line went dead after that, his last words lingering in the air. I sat there, stunned for a moment. The weight of his threat settled over me like a cold, suffocating blanket. But even then, I didn't break. I couldn't. Not anymore. It wasn't about the money. I could figure out a way to make it on my own. But the reality of his manipulation, his control over me, over everything I'd known, was clearer than ever. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't keep letting him pull my strings. I felt the anger inside me ignite once more. He wanted me to feel small. He wanted to break me, but he wasn't going to win. Not this time. The next day, I called my mother. I knew she'd side with him, but I had to try. I had to see if there was any part of her that could understand. "Mom, can we talk?" I asked when she picked up. There was a long silence before she spoke. "What about?" "About what's happening. About the way Dad is treating me." She sighed. "Hailey, you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. Your father does what he thinks is best for you. You should be grateful." Her words were like a slap in the face. I had spent so many years trying to get her approval, and now I realized that it was all a waste. She wasn't going to change either. Grateful? I couldn't help but scoff. Grateful for what? For being constantly belittled? For never being good enough in his eyes? She was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, it was with that familiar, placating tone I had grown used to over the years. "Hailey, you don't understand. We've always tried to do what's best for you, but you have to stop making everything so dramatic." I could feel the anger bubbling up again. "I'm not being dramatic, Mom. I'm just trying to live my life. I'm not going to keep being the family's emotional punching bag." Her silence was deafening. She didn't defend me. She didn't offer any support. She just let the silence hang between us. It was over. There was nothing left for me here. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. Everything I had known was slipping through my fingers, and for the first time, I realized I didn't care. I couldn't care, not anymore. The next few days were a blur. I went about my routine, but everything felt different. I started to see things in a new light, like the family I had tried to please for so long was a cage, and I was finally free. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the fixer. I was something more. I was someone who had taken control of her own life. I took steps to secure my future, starting with my finances. I opened a new bank account, one my father couldn't touch. I made sure everything was in my name, every credit card, every loan. I wasn't going to be dependent on them anymore. But then, just when I thought I was starting to gain control, I discovered something that knocked me off my feet. My mother had been using my credit card without my permission. I found out when I checked my statement one evening. The charges were small, easy to overlook, but they added up. I felt sick to my stomach. She had been using me just as much as my father had. I didn't hesitate. I confronted her. "Why, Mom?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Why did you do this?" She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she gave me an excuse. "I needed it, Hailey. I didn't have any other choice. You're my daughter. You should help." Her words stung, but I didn't let them get to me. "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "This is where I draw the line. You don't get to use me anymore." She tried to justify her actions, but I wasn't listening. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. "I will not tolerate this," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done." I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. I had finally done it. I had stood up for myself. But as I walked away from the conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of losing everything. The weight of my decisions hit me harder with each passing day. Every morning I woke up, I felt a sense of accomplishment for standing up for myself. But by the time the sun began to set, doubts crept in, gnawing at me from the inside. Was I doing the right thing? Was it really worth it? The consequences were beginning to unfold, and it wasn't all smooth sailing. I hadn't heard from my father since our last confrontation, and I had expected it. But what hit harder were the subtle jabs I started receiving from the rest of my family. My siblings, usually passive, had become more vocal. The occasional snide remarks or unsolicited advice turned into full-blown attempts to manipulate me back into the fold. One evening, my brother called, and the moment I saw his name flash on my phone, I knew what was coming. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You've really done it now, haven't you?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. I tried to keep my composure, but it was hard when I could hear the disappointment in his tone, as if I had betrayed not just him, but the whole family. He continued, Mom and Dad need you, Hailey. You're just going to turn your back on them like this. You've broken the family, you know that? His words stung, but they didn't hit the way they used to. I had heard it all before, the guilt trips, the accusations. I had spent years playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the one who would always clean up the mess, but no one ever thanked me for it. I'm not breaking anything, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm just choosing not to keep letting them walk all over me. You're selfish, he shot back, his voice growing more frantic. You'll see, you'll regret this. You're going to lose everything. I didn't respond right away. The truth was, I was starting to feel that pressure. The guilt, the shame, the feeling of being isolated from the people I'd always called family. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't back down. Not now. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their toxic world. Maybe I will regret it, I finally said. But I'm done being their emotional punching bag. I'm done being the one they call when they need something. There was silence on the other end, and then a harsh sigh. Well, don't come crawling back to me when it all falls apart. He hung up, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. The next morning, as I sat at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee, I tried to push the conversation with my brother from my mind, but it lingered, like a bad taste in my mouth. I had expected this. I had known that my decision would not be welcomed, but the weight of it, the constant pressure from all sides, it was harder to bear than I had imagined. Then came the call from my mother. Her voice, soft and pleading, made my stomach twist in knots. Hailey, honey, please, your father is worried about you. He wants to help, you know he does. I knew where this was headed. She was going to try to guilt me into submission, just like she always did. I don't need his help, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm fine on my own. Oh, sweetheart, don't be so stubborn, she replied, her voice laced with worry. You're making a mistake. Your father doesn't mean any harm. He's just trying to help. You don't understand. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The words were all too familiar. My father had always believed that his money was a tool to control, to make sure I never went too far from his grasp. But this time, it felt different. This time, I wasn't going to let them win. I'm not going back to the way things were, I said firmly. I won't keep playing their game. She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke again, it wasn't to apologize or offer any support. Instead, she said, We need you, Hailey. If you don't help us, if you don't come back into the fold, we'll be lost. The words stung, but something inside me snapped. She didn't understand. She never would. Mom, I'm not your backup. I'm not here to save everyone. I'm saving myself. For once, I'm putting myself first. There was a long silence, and then she hung up, leaving me with nothing but the sound of my own breath, shallow and unsteady. I sat there for a long time, feeling both empowered and empty. The family I had tried so hard to please, to keep together, was slipping away from me. And yet, in that moment, I realized something important. I had to let go. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was only holding me back. The phone call with my mother was the final straw. I was done. There was no turning back now. But just when I thought I had a handle on things, my father reached out. The message came late in the evening, a text that read simply, We need to talk. I'll help you if you come back. The words made my blood run cold. He wasn't offering help out of the goodness of his heart. He was trying to buy me back, trying to make me bend to his will once again. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. His offer, framed as an olive branch, was nothing more than another manipulation. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep playing his game. I couldn't keep pretending that I owed him anything. The next day, I called him. The moment I heard his voice, I knew it was going to be hard, but I couldn't back down now. I'm not coming back, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'm done with your games. I won't be your puppet anymore. He tried to talk over me, to make excuses, but I didn't listen. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, my hands shaking from the adrenaline, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. I had stood up to them. But as I sat there, alone, the weight of what I had just done settled in. The future was uncertain. I didn't know if my family would ever understand. I didn't know if they would ever forgive me. But one thing was clear. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The rift between us was growing, and I had no idea if it would ever heal. But I knew I couldn't go back. I had to keep moving forward, no matter the cost. I hadn't expected to feel this way. After everything that had happened, I should have felt triumphant, victorious even. But instead, there was a heaviness in my chest, a dull ache that wouldn't go away. Standing up for myself, breaking free from the family's grip, had been the right thing to do. But it didn't come without consequences. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. It hadn't been easy. The guilt of cutting ties, the years of trying to please everyone, it had all led me to this moment. But something had changed inside of me. I was no longer that daughter, that sister who lived in the shadows of other people's expectations. I had spent my entire life looking for validation from people who would never give it to me. And now, as I sat alone in my apartment, I could feel the weight of that realization. I had been living in the shadows for far too long. I thought about the years I spent sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of family. It had always been about them, about my father's approval, my mother's unspoken expectations, my siblings' judgments. I had been the one to pick up the pieces, the one who held everything together when it was falling apart, but no one ever noticed. No one ever thanked me. I had been invisible in my own life. But now, I was taking control. For the first time, I was making choices for myself, regardless of what my family thought. I wasn't going to live in their shadow anymore. This was my time. And no matter how hard it was, I knew I had to keep going. The phone call came at a time when I least expected it. My father's name appeared on the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. It had been weeks since we last spoke. I was still processing everything that had happened, still reeling from our last conversation. I didn't know if I was ready to face him again. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the answer button. But I had made my decision. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to run from this. I pressed the button. "Hailey, it's your father!" His voice was strained, almost apologetic, but there was a coldness in it that made me uneasy. "I've been thinking about what happened. I want to make things right. I'm sorry for how I've treated you." The words stung. I had spent so many years waiting for this moment, waiting for him to realize how much he had hurt me. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure what to feel. There was a part of me that wanted to believe him, to accept his apology, but another part of me, the part that had suffered through all those years of manipulation and neglect, was skeptical. "Why now?" I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "Why after all this time?" "I've had time to think," he said, his voice softening. "I've realized how much I've taken you for granted. I want to help you. I want to make it right." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another attempt to control me, another attempt to make me feel guilty, to drag me back into the fold. "I don't need your help," I said firmly, surprising myself with the strength of my words. "I'm fine on my own." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted. "You're making a mistake, Hailey. You're pushing everyone away. If you don't come back, you'll lose everything." I felt a wave of anger rush through me, but I didn't let it consume me. "I've already lost everything," I said quietly. "I lost myself trying to please all of you, and I'm not doing it anymore." I hung up the phone, feeling both relieved and drained. I had done it. I had stood up to him. But as I sat in silence, I couldn't shake the unease in my chest. The pressure to reconcile with my family, the guilt, the fear of being abandoned, they were all still there, lurking in the background. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I spent most of my time reflecting on my past, trying to come to terms with the damage that had been done. But I also felt a sense of empowerment. The more I distanced myself from my family, the more I realized how much of my life had been dictated by their expectations. I had allowed them to define me, to shape my identity. But that was over now. I started therapy, something I had been putting off for years. I had always been afraid to confront my past, afraid of the pain it would bring. But now, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't keep running. I had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Sitting in the therapist's office, I began to open up about my childhood. The memories were painful, but they were necessary. I talked about the times my father belittled me, the moments my mother turned a blind eye, and how for so long I had tried to prove my worth to them. I realized that I had been seeking approval from people who would never give it to me, and that was holding me back. It was in that moment that I had my breakthrough. I realized that I had been living in fear for so long. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. But now, I understood that the only person I needed approval from was myself. I didn't need my father's money or my mother's validation. I didn't need to sacrifice my happiness for anyone. I was finally taking control of my life. And that, in itself, was a victory. But just when I thought I had found my peace, the letter came. My mother had written to me, apologizing for not being there for me and asking for forgiveness. The words were heartfelt, but they didn't move me the way they should have. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process everything, to decide if this was something I could forgive, or if it was just another attempt to pull me back into their world. For now, I was going to take things one step at a time. I had come so far, and I wasn't going to let anything, anyone, drag me back. As I sat there, the weight of my decision pressed down on me. Had I made the right choice? Was I walking away from something I'd never be able to truly replace? The moment I hung up the phone after my last conversation with my father, I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief because I had finally put my foot down, but anger because I knew deep down he was never going to change. He had been manipulative, cold, and distant for too long, and now, when I was trying to break free, he was trying to reel me back in with false promises of change. I couldn't let it happen, not again. In the days that followed, I found myself in a constant tug-of-war within. I had set boundaries. I had taken the first steps towards freedom, but the guilt was suffocating. My family, especially my father, had been a part of me for as long as I could remember. The idea of cutting them off felt unnatural, yet every time I thought about giving in, I reminded myself that I couldn't go back to being that powerless version of myself. I couldn't let them take advantage of me anymore. One evening, as I was finishing my work at the small apartment I'd moved into after the confrontation, the phone rang. I knew immediately who it was: my father. His name on the screen made my pulse quicken. I wasn't ready for this, but at the same time, I had to take control of the situation once and for all. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hailey, I know things have been hard between us," my father began, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of desperation. "I've been thinking about everything, and I regret how I've treated you. I want to make it right. You're my daughter, and I want to help you. I know I've made mistakes, but I promise I can change." My stomach churned. It was the same line, the same tired words I had heard 1,000,000 times before. His promises meant nothing now. I had heard them all before. Every time he did something that hurt me, he'd apologize, saying he'd change. And yet, the behavior never stopped. It only got worse. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Why now?" "I've had time to reflect," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I've been a fool. I don't want to lose you, Hailey. I know I've hurt you, but I want to make it right." I felt a pang of something, maybe nostalgia, maybe hope, but I quickly buried it. "I can't just forget everything that's happened, Dad," I said firmly. "I'm not your punching bag anymore. I'm done." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to figure out how to pull me back into his web. Finally, he spoke again, this time with a hint of anger in his voice. "You're making a huge mistake, Hailey," he said, his tone cold. "This is your family, and you're walking away from us. If you don't come back, I'll cut you off. You'll have nothing." The words stung, but they didn't break me. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I've already lost everything, Dad, I said, my voice calm but firm. And I'm better off without you. Without waiting for a response, I ended the call. The relief that washed over me was immense, but it was quickly followed by the sharp realization of the consequences. I had just burned a bridge, and it felt like I was losing a part of myself. But deep down, I knew I had done the right thing. A few days later, I arranged a meeting with my father and the rest of my family. This wasn't about reconciliation or making amends. This was about setting boundaries. This was about taking control of my life, and I was determined to do it. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. The meeting took place at my father's house. I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest, but my resolve was solid. My father, mother, and siblings were all there, waiting for me to speak. The tension in the room was thick, and I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. They all wanted me to come back into the fold, to apologize, to fall back into the old patterns, but I wasn't going to do that. "I'm done," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "I'm done living in this toxic cycle. I'm done with being manipulated, being guilt-tripped into doing things I don't want to do. I'm setting boundaries, and if you can't respect them, then I won't be a part of this family anymore." My father's expression hardened. "You're overreacting," he said dismissively. "This is all your fault. You're the one who's tearing the family apart." The words hit me like a slap to the face, but I didn't flinch. "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not the one tearing this family apart. You are. You've been doing it for years, and I've had enough." The room fell silent as everyone processed my words. My father's face flushed with anger, but I didn't back down. I wasn't going to let him gaslight me anymore. He could say whatever he wanted, but I knew the truth. "You can't just walk away from us," my brother said, his voice tinged with accusation. "You're being selfish, Hailey. We need you." "No, you don't," I replied firmly. "You need me to be the person I'm not, someone who always says yes, who always puts everyone else first. But that's not me anymore. I'm done." The confrontation ended with more accusations, more attempts to manipulate me, but I didn't budge. As I left my father's house that day, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. I had stood my ground. I had taken control. But as the days passed, I realized something even more devastating. My father wasn't the only one who had been manipulating me. The rest of my family had been using me too, and I had been blind to it all. I learned the truth about my family's financial manipulation. My father had been hiding part of my inheritance, using it for his own gain without my knowledge. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. It was the final straw. For the first time, I saw my family for what they truly were: manipulative, controlling, and selfish. They had never cared about me. They only cared about what I could give them. The pain of that realization was sharp, but it only reinforced my decision to cut ties. I couldn't be a part of that world anymore. I started the process of cutting ties completely. I took control of my finances, and for the first time, I was living for myself. I was free. But as I sat in my apartment one evening, thinking about everything that had happened, I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. Was this the right decision? Would I ever truly feel free, or would the weight of my family's abandonment always follow me? I didn't know the answer. But for the first time in my life, I was ready to find out. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the city lights flickering outside the window as the cold air seeped through the cracks in the walls. It had been weeks since the confrontation with my family, weeks since I had taken control of my life, and yet I still felt the weight of the past pressing on my chest. The more I tried to move forward, the harder it became to shake the chains that had held me captive for so long. But I was stronger now. I knew that. I could feel it deep in my bones. I had spent years allowing them to dictate who I was, what I could and couldn't do. Their control over me, their manipulation, their emotional abuse. I had endured it all because I didn't know how to break free. But I had finally found the courage. I had walked away. And now, as hard as it was, I had to stay gone. No matter what they said or did, I couldn't go back. That's when my phone buzzed on the table, the sound jarring against the silence. I stared at the screen. It was a message from my sister. Hailey, I miss you. Please, let's talk. It's been so long. I know things have been rough, but don't you think it's time we start healing? We're family, and family should stick together. The message sent a wave of guilt rushing through me. I thought about all the good memories, the holidays, the birthdays, the laughter. It was all so familiar, so comforting. But I knew better than to let nostalgia cloud my judgment. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about control. I set the phone down, taking a deep breath. I wasn't going to fall for this. Not again. The cycle had to end. I wasn't going to let them pull me back in with promises of love or fake apologies. This was my life now. I was in control, and no amount of sentimental guilt would change that. The next day, I made the decision to confront my father once and for all. It wasn't just about cutting ties anymore. It was about standing up for myself. I was no longer a child to be manipulated or controlled. I had to make him understand that I wasn't going to let him or anyone else dictate my future. I called him. His voice, calm and controlled, echoed through the phone as if nothing had changed, as if everything was still fine. He started with the same old story. Hailey, I've been thinking. I want to make things right. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, for everything. I almost laughed. How many times had I heard this? Too many. He always said the same things, over and over, but nothing ever changed. I wasn't about to fall for it again. Dad, I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. I'm done with the apologies. I don't need them anymore. I need you to understand something. I'm not your punching bag anymore. You've treated me like I don't matter my whole life. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm done. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear his breath catch. What are you talking about? You can't just throw everything away like this. I'm not throwing anything away, I replied, my voice growing stronger. I'm walking away from a toxic family dynamic that has been holding me back for years. I'm done trying to please you, done trying to earn your approval. I'm done being your emotional doormat. His voice shifted, going from defensive to manipulative. You think you're just going to walk away from us? From your family? You'll regret this. You'll be alone. I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me. I'd rather be alone than keep living in a place where I'm not respected or valued, I said, my words sharp. You've never respected me, and I'm not going to keep playing this game. I'm done. Another silence. Then, in a desperate tone, he said, Hailey, don't do this. You're breaking our family apart. I stood tall, even though I was standing alone in my apartment. No, Dad. You're the one who broke the family, not me. I'm just trying to fix myself. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was a sense of relief. It was over. The confrontation was done. I had said what I needed to say, and I wasn't going to let him guilt-trip me into feeling bad about it, but that didn't mean it was easy. I still felt the sting of his words, the weight of everything that had happened between us. Cutting ties with my family wasn't just about walking away. It was about severing the connection I had known my whole life. It was about realizing that I couldn't change them, and I couldn't keep trying to. The following week, as I began moving forward with the legal steps to reclaim what was mine, I received a letter. It was from my father. It was a final attempt to manipulate me, to reel me back in. The letter was filled with regret. He apologized for everything, for the way he treated me, for the things he had said. He said he was proud of me for standing up for myself, and that he wanted to try to rebuild what we had lost. I read the letter, and for a moment, I felt the familiar tug at my heart. But it was fleeting. I knew the game he was playing. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about him trying to regain control over me. I tore the letter up. I didn't need it. I didn't need him. I was free. As I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, the weight of everything began to settle in. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, but I had made it through. I had walked away from the family that had held me back for so long. And now, for the first time in my life, I was living for me. But as free as I felt, there was still a lingering sadness. Was I really free? Or was I just running from something I couldn't escape? Just then, my phone rang. The number on the screen wasn't from a family member. but from an old friend. My heart skipped a beat as I answered. Hailey, my friend's voice came through. I have an opportunity for you. It's big. I'm moving to a new city, and I think you should come with me. It's a fresh start. The offer was tempting. A new life. A new chapter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the excitement of possibility surge through me. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but wonder, could I really leave everything behind, or would the past always follow me, no matter where I went? I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but now that it was finally here, a sense of calm washed over me. The decision had been made. I could no longer live in the shadow of my family's manipulation. I had broken free, but this final confrontation would determine whether the chains would stay broken or if they would pull me back into their toxic grip. The truth was, I hadn't just left them behind. I had built something for myself. The woman standing here now, resolute and clear-headed, was not the same person who had once cowered in fear of their judgment. I had learned the lessons of emotional manipulation, betrayal, and the endless undermining of my worth. I knew now that my family's love had never been unconditional. It was conditional upon my submission to their control. And I was done with it. I had spent so many years looking for validation from them, trying to prove that I was worth something. But what had it gotten me? Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and emotionally battered. I had been trapped, bound by my own need for approval. No more. I had to stand my ground and tell them exactly how I felt. Tell them what they had done to me. The lies, the manipulation, the rejection. It had all led to this. I was no longer that lost girl trying to please them. I was a woman who had found her voice. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was him. My father. I let it ring for a moment before I picked it up. I wasn't nervous anymore. I had long since learned that fear no longer had a place in my life. Hailey, he said, his voice strained. I've been thinking about everything. I want to make things right. I can't lose you again. The words hit me hard, but not in the way they once did. I had been so desperate to hear him say those words, to believe that he truly cared. But now I knew better. His words were nothing but empty promises, the same ones I had heard too many times before. He didn't want to change. He wanted to control me, just as he always had. Dad, I said, my voice steady, I don't need you to fix things. What you've done, it can't be fixed by a few words. There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him scrambling to find the right words. You don't understand. I was doing what I thought was best for you. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't have to hurt me, I replied, cutting him off. You just had to listen. But you never did. All these years, you treated me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter unless it was convenient for you. The words I had held back for so long finally spilled out, each one a revelation of everything I had kept inside. You manipulated me, Dad. You lied to me. You used me to prop up your own sense of control, and I let you because I thought that was the only way to earn your love. But I'm done. I'm done trying to win your approval. There was a pause, and then I heard it, the sound of him shifting, moving away from me. You're throwing everything away for nothing. Do you think you'll find happiness on your own? You'll regret this, Hailey. You'll be alone. I wasn't shaken. The words didn't sting the way they once would have. Instead, I felt a sense of calm, as if the final pieces had fallen into place. No, Dad, I won't regret it. I'm already living a better life without you. I ended the call without another word. The weight of it all didn't hit me immediately. But as I stared at the phone in my hand, I realized I was free. I had walked away, and no one, not my father, not my family, could make me go back. But freedom came with its own price. A few days later, I received a letter from my father. It was a last-ditch effort to pull me back in, a final act of manipulation. He apologized again, promising that things would change, that he could be the father I always needed. But I knew better. I'd heard it all before. His promises meant nothing. I tore the letter into pieces. I didn't need it. I didn't need him. I started the process of legally reclaiming what was mine. Money, property, everything they had taken from me. I knew it was going to be a long and difficult fight, but I was prepared. For the first time in my life, I wasn't relying on anyone else to take care of me. I was taking control, and nothing was going to stop me. As I was finalizing everything, the phone rang again. It wasn't from a family member this time, but a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, unsure of what to expect. "Hailey, it's Sarah," the voice on the other end said. "I have a job offer for you. A big one. It's a new opportunity, one that could change everything for you. I'm leaving the city, and I want you to come with me." The offer was tempting, a chance to start fresh in a new city, away from everything and everyone that had hurt me. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to move on that quickly. I still felt raw from everything that had happened, and the thought of leaving it all behind, my family, my past, felt both liberating and terrifying. I sat down and reflected on the decision. I had broken free. I had taken control of my life. But was I truly ready to walk away from everything? Could I really leave it all behind? Or would the past follow me wherever I went? As I hung up the phone, the question lingered in my mind. I had made it this far, but could I truly break the chains for good? I thought the hardest part was over, but the game had only just begun, and I was ready to play. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman I had become. It wasn't just the reflection of someone older, or even someone who had been through so much. It was the face of someone who had endured, learned, and finally had the courage to let go. I'd gone through the storm and come out on the other side, not broken, but stronger. The past had shaped me, yes, but it no longer had the power to control me. It had been a long journey to this point, one filled with moments of self-doubt, pain, and betrayal. There were times when I wondered if I'd made the right decisions, questioning if I was throwing away relationships that, despite everything, were still my family. But I knew now, in my heart, that I had made the right choice. The weight of their manipulations, the emotional toll they'd taken on me, had become too much. I couldn't keep carrying it. The lessons were clear. I had learned the importance of self-worth, the necessity of putting myself first. I had learned that the love of family was not always unconditional, that sometimes it came with strings attached. And I had learned that the most important person in my life was me. My family might never understand the decision I had made, but I didn't need their approval anymore. The truth was, I didn't regret cutting them off. I had grown too much to go back to the version of myself that lived for their approval, the girl who second-guessed every decision, the woman who had let guilt drive her every action. That person no longer existed. As I took in my reflection, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was the calm that comes with knowing you've done what's necessary for your own well-being, for your own happiness. No more looking over my shoulder, wondering if I'd made a mistake. I had taken control, and I was free. But before I could even take a moment to enjoy this newfound clarity, the phone rang. It was my father. I hesitated for a brief second before answering, the weight of the past still hanging between us like an invisible barrier. "Hailey," he said, his voice a little shaky, like he knew this might be his last chance to speak to me on his terms. "I've been thinking about everything. I know things got out of hand, but I want to make it right. I know I've hurt you, but I want to fix it. I'm sorry for everything." I heard the words, but they felt hollow. I knew the pattern by now. The words were always the same. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. We're family." But it wasn't enough anymore. I had spent my life waiting for those words, hoping they would come, hoping that one day he would change. But I couldn't keep waiting for something that wasn't coming. "I don't need you to fix things," I said, my voice steady. "I need you to understand that I can't keep doing this. I can't keep trying to please you. I can't keep living for your approval. I'm not your puppet anymore." There was a long silence on the other end. I knew he didn't expect me to say it. I knew he thought, like always, he could talk his way out of it. "Well, you're just throwing everything away," he said finally, his voice a mix of frustration and desperation. "I did the best I could. You're just going to walk away from your family?" "Yes," I replied, not hesitating. "I am." His response was nothing but static on the line. He had no more words, no more excuses. I had already heard them all, and for the first time, I didn't need to hear them anymore. I hung up the phone. For a moment, I stood still, the weight of the decision sinking in. This was it. There was no going back now. The next few days were a blur as I focused on securing my future. I reached out to legal professionals to start the process of reclaiming what was mine: properties, assets, the inheritance that had been stolen from me. I could feel the change in me. There was a confidence I hadn't known before. The woman who was once paralyzed by guilt and fear was now taking the steps towards something bigger. And then, just as I thought I had fully broken free, a final message came through. A letter from my father. It was a thin attempt to pull me back. Another apology. Another promise to change. Another plea to let go of the past. I read it, felt nothing, and tore it into pieces. He didn't get to have me back. Not anymore. Not after everything he had done. With everything finally in motion, I turned my attention to the future. There were still pieces to put together, still steps to take, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't trying to keep anyone happy except for myself. The road ahead would be hard, but I was ready for it. And then, out of nowhere, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my father. It was an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. They had a job offer for me. An opportunity to start fresh in a new city. The temptation was there. A new life, a new beginning, far away from everything that had held me back. But the choice wasn't as simple as it seemed. As I ended the call, I sat down and reflected. The past had tried to drag me back, but I was ready to face it. I was no longer the girl who ran from confrontation. I was the woman who walked toward it, with strength, with courage, and with the clarity of knowing who I was. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready for it. The past had tried to drag me back, but this time I was ready to face it with strength, not fear. The journey was far from over.